So in our previous video, we talked about your shutter speed, your ISO, and your aperture, and how you need to balance those three things in order to get a proper exposure. Now, in today's video, we're going to talk about two guides you can use that are inside of your camera to help you get that proper exposure. Okay, now let's talk about the exposure value meter. The exposure value meter is going to be found on your camera screen, probably right there at the bottom or on the side for some cameras. And it has a value of -3 to +3. So what you want to do is you want to get that little arrow that sits on top of the numbers as close to 0 as possible. Quick side note, don't get your exposure value meter mixed up with your exposure compensation dial. On some cameras, there's a little dial that has those same values on it, -3 to +3. That's a whole different scenario. We'll get back to that in another video. Now, what your camera sees as a proper exposure is also determined by the metering mode that your camera is in. Okay, so your camera's exposure value meter relies on these 4 modes: spot, center weighted, average, and multi. They might be called different things on different cameras, but those are the names I'm going to go with. And I'll probably put a graph up from capturetheatlas.com. They have a nice graphic where you can see the names of all the different metering modes depending on your camera brand. Now, there are 2 metering modes that I suggest you be really careful about using until you understand the metering modes, and that's spot and center weighted. The reason why you want to be careful of these modes is because what they literally do is that they take the focusing point and whatever it's actually focused on or pointed towards, that's what it's metering for. So to your eye, a photo or the scene could look perfectly exposed, but if it's pointed at something black, it's going to say something like, oh, you're 2 or 3 stops underexposed, when actually your entire scene is perfectly fine. Now, let's talk about my favorite way to meter a scene. And it doesn't really use a meter, it uses a graph, and it's called the histogram. Why is the histogram my favorite? Because it doesn't care what metering mode you are in. Whatever it sees, it evaluates the entire image and it lets you know, okay, you got a good decent amount of information here, or you have too much information that's underexposed or too much information that's overexposed. The histogram is divided into 5 parts. You have your blacks, your shadows, your midtones, your highlights, and your whites. What makes the histogram so valuable is that it shows you the luminance value of all of your pixels. Now, why do I see so much value in the histogram? Because not only is it helping you get your exposure right in camera, but it can also help you while editing your photos. Okay, now let me show you 2 example photos on why it's useful for editing. Now, this one you're seeing here isn't anything special. It's just an underexposed image that, oh my God, I made a mistake with. You see that histogram up there? That little bad boy is going to help us get this image back to normal. Now you can see in Lightroom here, I am boosting the exposure and showing you how the histogram is moving over. And now I've pushed a bunch of those pixels over into the highlight and white area. And clearly I'm overblowing it a bit. But I have gotten the 2 figurines back into a decent exposure range. And so because I've blown out that background, I'm going to pull the highlights back just so I can try to get that highlight detail back. And it looks like I had to push it all the way back, minus 100%. I lifted the shadows a little bit more because I thought, maybe we can see a little bit more in there. Pulling the whites down so we can get a little more information back. I'm just adjusting it just to see How much should I actually pull it? Bam. And there you can see quite a big difference from what it was to what it is now. I think I'm going to push those blacks too. The black levels could come up a bit, just so you can see the base of the statue a little bit more. Yeah, that's fine right there. And there you go. Those are your two in-camera options that you can use to help you nail your exposure every single time. See you guys in the next video. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Need those viewers. Let's get them up.